Hello, welcome to Placing Students in the Curriculum. My name is Celeste Marion. I am the Director of Professional Development and Training for Specially Designed Education Services. We are the company that has published the Functional Academics Curriculum, or you may know it as the Styer-Fitzgerald Program for Functional Academics. Thank you for being with us today. This webinar is going to be hyper-focusing, taking 1 hour to look at how we place the students within the curriculum, which means how are we linking the assessment piece to the curriculum component of the functional academics. We'll be looking at the assessment and the student portfolio and how we make a comprehensive decisions about the program placement. Before we begin, I'd like to introduce you to our new Functional Academics website. This is a website where you can download digital formats of the entire print program for easy use. It is now on sale, but current users of the Styer-Fitzgerald program like yourselves who have already created an account with sdesworks.com on the shared resources site has access to this, and I'm going to give that to you right now. So I'd like you to go to sdesworks.com. I will also put this link in below the YouTube comments. So sdesworks.com, click on the button Shared Resources. You may or may not already have an account with Shared Resources. If you do, I encourage you to remember your login, username, and your password to access Shared Resources. You will be using the same username and password to access the Functional Academics. We're currently giving all of our shared resource members free access to functionalacademics.net for the next 12 months. So I recommend you take advantage of that. If you have not registered for shared resources, go ahead and click this button and do that now. Once you have your email and password, let's go to functionalacademics.net. Again, functionalacademics.net. Okay. To look like this. Functionalacademics.net. You will come to a username and email login. You will notice that here you do not have a reset password button because this is a subscription, a paid subscription process. So if you did forget your password from sdes.com, you can click on the Forget Your Password button right here, this link, and our administrators will take care of you and send you a reset password link. Okay. Once you have your username and password, go ahead and log in to functionalacademics.net. Welcome to functionalacademics.net. Here you have different buttons to help you access the assessment components of functional academics, the curriculum components, and student portfolio, which may sound familiar to you. You also have additional lesson plans and activities, tools to help you summarize data, implementation tools, classroom management strategies, and additional resources. Today, we're only going to be focusing on components of the assessment and portfolio. It is not necessary for you to have an account with Functional Academics to participate in today's webinar, but I am going to give you access to links of where these tools and pieces are within the site as a digital resource for you. Okay. Most of you who are on this call either have a print program or a cloud subscription. So all of the things I'm going to talk about today, you have access to in your print program. I'm not going to be specifically guiding how to find them, but I will be dropping these links into our chat. Since this is a recorded webinar and you don't have access to the chat, I will be putting the links to all of the things that I shared today in the comment section of this YouTube video. I do encourage you to create a folder on your desktop or your drive, your own folder from your own Word document or your own, wherever you save your own documents, titled Functional Academics Master Folder. I click here on my documents. You can see here I have a master folder that says Functional Academics Master Folder. This is where you can easily store a lot of the things that I'm going to share with you today for tools to use in the future. So go ahead and take a moment and do that. Once you've been able to access functionalacademics.net and recuperated your password from sdesworks.com from the shared resources site and created that folder on your desktop, I encourage you to stop on in and continue this webinar. Okay, here we go. We are going to be focusing on how we successfully and comprehensively place our students within the functional academics curriculum. Remember, the functional academics program has several components. The two of the major components are the assessment, okay, what we use to understand how much of the curriculum content our student already knows. And we have the curriculum, which means the lesson plans and activities that you will be running on a daily basis that you have selected and assigned to the student based on how the student placed into the assessment, okay? Styer-Fitzgerald program for functional academics has the assessment component and a curriculum component. To begin. So where do we begin with placing students in the curriculum? We will be focusing on 5 different components today that are very important in order to make a comprehensive decision about how and what programs to work on with your student. Okay, first is that student assessment. Again, you may be at different stages in the student assessment, but I'm sure all of you are familiar with what the assessment piece is and how to go about using it. The second piece is what we call a plot chart. I'm going to be going through each one of these components in its own slide, but I want to introduce these concepts to you. The plot chart is that present levels of performance chart. It is a cumulative summary of where your student placed in the assessment and what their scores were. This will be a very handy tool to be able to connect to curriculum flow charts and help understand what the recommended programs are to work on with your student. The third component we have here is the student portfolio. This is what we know about the student. You will find different student portfolio indexes within your assessment testing kit. You can also find them online at Functional Academics. These are indexes to understand how your students communicate. What are their social needs? What are the behavior needs? How do they work on and manage technology? There are many forms in the student portfolio that can go home to families to get family intake, family buy-in. What is important to them? What would they like to see their students learning at school? Okay, the student portfolio is a very important component in understanding what the needs are of our student and where they're at, and then how we use that information to make decisions for programming moving forward. The fourth component we're going to cover today is the curriculum flow chart. Curriculum flow chart is just that, a flow chart that shows you and links where the student places in the assessment and what recommended programs the student should work on based on their scores in the assessment. We're going to go into that later as well. And the last component is the actual curriculum. Before we decide on what programs we want to work on with a student, it's good to know what those programs entail. Why would we teach them? What is time telling? What is time management? What is money math? Let's get into that curriculum and review a bit of it before we make the decision to decide to teach it to our students. Okay, so we're going to go over these 5 things today, and I'm going to show you where to find all of these, and we'll talk about each one of them individually. And then we'll open it up for an opportunity for you to think about your process and what can be done, okay, with your own students. So let's start with that student assessment. Again, many of you in the print program have student assessment spiral bound books, okay, one for each of your students. For those of you in the cloud program, you can either download those student packets off your digital access, or you can get them, you have it all in United STI, okay? Let's just take a peek into functional academics today. I'm going to click on assessment. If you have and can access this, you can click on the level that you teach and go into elementary or secondary, and you have all of the content areas right here. Let's just remember what an assessment page looks like. Okay, here's an example of time telling. You have the assessment sequence. This is your plot level or your summary of assessment results just for time telling. Remember that these areas are sequenced and we do want to begin at the beginning. Okay, we want to start assessing our students from the first level and subsequently move on based on the student's score. Most of the recommendations from the assessment, if your student scores above 80%, to move on to that second level. Remember, you can, I'm going to scroll down here through the instructional guidelines and assessment details. Here is a data sheet for assessment. If your student can match this analog time, for example, in this one, you would note the number of times they got correct divided by the number possible to calculate your percentage. This percentage is what you will be charting up here on level 1. If it's above 80%, the majority of the scores are above 80%, you will go on to that next level that says telling digital time. So we would go down here to telling digital time, okay, with the time cards provided. Can they tell the digital time? You will score, put a circle around the correct answers and a line through the incorrect answers and create the score, right? So that's just a review of your student assessment. We want to make sure that we complete all sections of the student assessment, not just the ones we think are applicable or the ones we want to actually run programs on. Try and do your best to complete all sections. You may learn something that you didn't know about a student. Okay, you may learn that they actually know how to manage a laptop better than you thought they did. You may actually learn that they're very good at writing. Okay, so I really recommend that you try to complete all the sections. Take time to assess. This will come with organization. Organize your time with your students. Make sure you have 10 to 15 minutes to be able to sit individually with a student in a time period and work with them. Present the materials. Really try and find out what they know. Okay, maybe your other students will be working on independent activities during this time or with paraeducators, but plan for assessment time. Next, modify and adapt the assessment as necessary. We know that not all students are ready for flashcards. We know that not all students can go down that list of sight words and read them in that list, in that column. If you need to use some of the materials from the teaching materials kit, like the actual flashcards for sight words, go ahead and use those too. If you have students that have difficulty with visual fields or positioning, change the positioning of those fields. Use a wipe-off board for flashcard for sight words. Use a small wipe-off board. Use a computer. Adapt as necessary. Things like location concepts, go ahead and use objects, real objects. The materials that are included in the assessment testing kit are a great way to begin, but please feel free to adapt and modify as necessary. If you feel those sight word lists are too long and cumbersome for your students, by all means, don't go through each one of those columns. If you go through the first column and you find your students getting a pretty good majority of those words, then just recognize the trends. Do they miss the words that have all lowercase or all uppercase? And just note for that, because when you decide to program for that program moving forward, you're going to take that data and help it shape what you want to work on with that student. Okay, so do feel free to modify and adapt as necessary. Don't forget to use your assessment book for with the print program or those printable PDFs I just showed you. For those of you working in cloud, go ahead and enter that data right inside Unitas TI. Okay, and again, you can use some of these materials included in the assessment testing kit. We have them all in the cloud as well, and you can download them from the website. So let me just show you here. If we are in functional reading, okay. It looks like you're gonna have, okay, you cannot download the assessment testing kits. Possibly you can find them in different places, possibly in the curriculum, but we can go back to that in a minute, okay? So again, your student assessment. What's next? Let's look at what these plot charts are, or what we call a summary of assessment results. I'm going to pull one up for you to easily see. Okay, when we go to student assessments, again, I'll show you back to the homepage of functional academics. When we go to the student assessment and we click on the area that we work in, elementary or secondary, the first thing you will find right here in the middle of the screen is a present levels of performance sheet. Okay. For those using a print program, I believe your plot chart can be found within your curriculum or your student data book. This is a really easy way to get to it as well. So here you have a sheet a cumulative summary, basically, of all of the content areas. Function, this is for elementary: colors, shapes, location, concepts, technology, writing, time telling, calendar, money, math, etc., etc. Okay, and what you're going to be doing is transferring those scores that you recorded in your student assessment onto this one-page document. Okay, you can put this one-page document in your student data book or have a separate folder for it. You want to have one for each student. So let's take a look at what the secondary one looks like. It looks almost exactly the same with the content areas relevant to secondary. Okay, so there is our secondary plot chart. I will also, I've just shown you how to get to these. If you cannot access functional academics, you will also see these links in the comment section of this YouTube video. Let's go back and talk about how we use the present levels of performance chart. Okay, first of all, we will start with the assessment results. And remember, those assessment results we can get from either polling data from our cloud bases from the dashboard or from our student books, and we want to transfer them for each content area. We want to fill in the yes or no. This is a newer variation that you may not have as part of their print program. You see that we have a score here. Remember how I showed you how to calculate a score from the summary of assessment results? I love looking at this cumulative summary because at first glance, I can see where my student placed in functional reading and what their scores were for each level. If the student scored higher than 80% for each one of these levels, I will mark a yes in this level area, which means the student passed that level. Okay, once the student reaches a no, I will stop there and not continue to assess, and I will mark this as a possible goal to work on with my student. Okay, and I will also mark this X here, meaning assessment complete. If there's a content area that is blank, that means you didn't assess. Okay, if you did assess an area and the student didn't even reach the first level, go ahead and mark no and mark an assessment date on it. Okay, it's really important that we mark an assessment date even if the student can't reach the level 1. Okay, that means that you tried to find out if that student has that skill set. Again, the majority of the programs that are scored less than 80%, the majority of the levels that scored less than 80%, you do not move on to the next level. Those that are over 80%, you would move on to the next level. There are some areas that are not sequenced like this, so, like technology. Okay, you could have a student that could very easily type with a model or operate a computer, but can't use a phone or a tablet. So these are not sequenced skills. So I do recommend that you look at the next step sections of your assessments to know how and when to move on. Okay, so that is our plot chart or summary of assessment results. The student portfolio is an excellent tool that gives us information that is crucial and vital to understanding our students' abilities. Okay, and we're looking at students' abilities outside of academics. You will find many checklists in several different places. If you're in the print program, you may find the student portfolio checklist still on a flash drive. If you're in the cloud program, you may find them in your module number 10, which is student portfolio, with all of the different forms hyperlinked for you to download. But for everybody, I'm going to show you right now the easiest way to access portfolio is from that Functional Academics website. Click on portfolio. And you will find that regardless of the student being in elementary or secondary, you have all of the sections here for you. Let's click on personal management to get an idea of one of the indexes that we will find. In each one of these areas, you can read a little bit about what this section means. Okay, and why would be interested in knowing. And let's take a look at a secondary school inventory form. Okay, for example, does the student, what are the students' toileting needs? For high school, we're looking at things like menstruation, washing hands, can they blow their nose and brush their hair? What about tying shoelaces and getting dressed and undressed? How about eating? How about using utensils? Okay, why are these important? I'm going to talk about that in just a moment, but we have an inventory for school and an inventory for family. Student portfolio is an excellent way to get the family involved in having them help you better understand their child. Okay, it also gives us an excellent way for parents to give us input on what they would like you to work on at school. Okay, so some of these pieces, let's see, personal management, family inventory, we have IEP goals at a glance, related services, common social, personal management, leisure and rec, future planning, independence and vocational, technology, what can they already access? How about community access? Are they going into the community? Would family like them to go into the community? Okay, family is very important in having you help fill out these forms, and we'll talk about why. So the student assessment gives us an idea of what the student knows of the functional academics content. Okay, how much do they know about using a calculator, about identifying colors, what technology can they manage, what are their writing skills, how about their math skills, reading skills. Okay, very much based in academics. The student portfolio helps us know helps us understand what to know about the student. And together, these tools are going to help us make comprehensive decisions for selecting programs. If a family comes back to us and says, hey, we would really like you to be focusing on functional words that are meaningful to us in a shopping list, because our child is going to the grocery store with us on a continual basis, and we want to include them in that process. Can the sight words that you select to work on with the student be around shopping and grocery stores? Okay, that is a perfect example of how you would choose functional academics sight words, functional reading, and input from the family, from the student portfolio to make a decision about how to run the sight words program. Okay, see where I'm getting at here? Really important to bring these two pieces together. Let's take a look at one more tool, a curriculum flow chart. Are you familiar with a curriculum flow chart? Have you seen a curriculum flow chart? For print people, you will find a curriculum flow chart located at the end of each assessment section in your student assessment. And you will find it at the beginning of each of your curriculum content areas. For those that have cloud access, you will find curriculum flowcharts in your content area guidelines. And for everybody, let's find curriculum flowcharts here on functionalacademics.net. Okay, let's click on the curriculum piece. Let's click on secondary level. And we're going to pick a content area to take a look at that flowchart. Let's do money math. There we go. So in money math, we actually have 3 pieces of money math. As you can see, we have calculator, bills, and coins. So we find a curriculum flow chart for each one of these sections. Okay, the curriculum flow chart takes on the left-hand column the assessment results that you will pull from your plot chart and matches it to the recommended lessons in the curriculum. Okay, this is your flow chart. This is where you will go once you are finished with the assessment and you have your assessment results on your plot chart to be able to match it up with what curriculum lessons are recommended for you to work on with your student based on what the assessment results are. This is also a perfect place to come back to once your student masters a program to see what is the next in the sequence to work on with your student. So curriculum flowchart is a very important tool that you'll be using continuously throughout the program. Now let's look at how we link the plot chart with that curriculum flowchart. Okay, these are the two most important tools you can have in your tool belt right now to bring it together. Let's do a couple of exercises and see how you can unite these two. Okay, so here's an example of a completed plot chart, or at least a content area section of a completed plot chart. We have functional reading. You can see here that we have an X over the yes. The only thing that's missing here is a text for percentage, but let's try and plug that in real quick. I'm doing this on, obviously, a computer. But you can get an example. You can see an example. So let's say our student scored 80%. We're going to say that they passed this level, yes, and we went on to the next level, okay? Let's say the next level, reading the list of sight words. Let's say our student scored 84%. So we continued on to level 3, reading the sight words from lists 4 through 6. But here, on these sight words, that we tested, our student only scored 35%. So we stopped there. The student did not pass level 3. This could be a potential goal. So we're going to mark it. And we're going to mark this as assessment complete. Well, now let's go to that flow chart. Okay, and you may not see it very well, so I'm going to pop it into the slideshow here so you can have it expanded. Okay, first of all, did the student recognize the letter? Wait, am I doing, I think I'm not matching, one's elementary and one's secondary, but let's just take an example of this flow chart. Let's say that on the plot chart, the student did recognize the letters and sounds at 80%. So we moved them down the flow. They could identify their name as well. And when we went to test sight words from list 1 through 6, they only scored 35%. Okay, let's take it as an example. Did they pass that section? No. So what is the recommended program to work on with them? Functional Reading C, Sight Words Phase 1. Okay, this curriculum flow chart helps us use the plot levels in the assessment results and connecting it to the recommended curriculum lessons. Let's do another example. What about this student right here? Okay, they did not even pass recognizing letters and sounds. I'm going to mark no. My assessment is complete. So what do we do if my student doesn't even place in part 1 or 2? Let's take a look. Okay, here's that flow chart again. Recognizing letters and sounds, can they do it? No. And/or identify their name? No. So what should we work on with them? Functional reading A, letter sound ID, and name ID. Okay, it gives me a recommendation of what lessons I should run with them. Now I'm looking at this curriculum flow chart, and if I'm new to the program, I'm not going to be very familiar with what functional reading A, letter sound ID is. I mean, I kind of get an idea, like, okay, letters and sounds and name ID. But now I want to go to that 5th component that we are talking about called the curriculum. Okay, it's really important to understand what the programs are that are recommended, what those lessons are, before making a decision to decide to run them with our students. Okay, before we decide, like, yeah, I do want to run letter sound ID with my student. Okay, so we're going to be able to review our curriculum components. For the print program, you have a book that's called Curriculum. I recommend that when you see the recommended lessons, for example, functional reading A and functional reading B, that you find those in functional reading sections of the curriculum. If you have cloud versions, you will go to your content area guidelines and you will open up functional reading and take a look at the programs there. Let's do it on functional academics. Back to that home page, so we have an idea of where we're going. I'm going to click on curriculum and I'm going to pull up functional reading. The curriculum flowchart just told me that I should be focusing on functional reading A and functional reading. Let's see, what did it tell me to do? Functional reading A and functional reading B. I'm going to figure out what that is before I decide to assign it to my student. Okay, here's my flowchart. A and B is what it recommended to me. I can see that there is actually a sequence here. Okay, I'm going to read through a little bit of the instructional guidelines about lessons and how functional reading is important, maybe a little bit about what materials are needed, and I'm going to find my letter sound ID area. It tells me I may already have a method for teaching letter sound ID, which I do. So how is this any different? Okay, so I'm taking a look here just to try to figure out how we instruct letter sound ID. Maybe I even pull up a lesson plan, take a peek inside a lesson plan. I find the long-term goal, I find the short-term goal, I find the materials that are needed. I see that it is a direct instruction format where I present the instruction one time. I ask the student I wait for the correct response. If they give me the correct response, I circle it on the data sheet. I see that there's instructions here for verbal and nonverbal students, etc., etc. We will go into a deeper dive into the curriculum in a different webinar, but this is what I'm encouraging you to do. Let's take a look at a few supporting materials. Okay, here's that lesson plan again. Here's some letters and animals. Just taking a peek at what I can do with letter sound ID in order to make a comprehensive decision about, is this a program I want to run with my student and why? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close these. So we have just gone over the 5 components of how we make it, what are needed to make program placement decisions. Okay, so this is where it is time for you to think critically about what you are going to do with your own students. I'd like you to take this moment to ask yourself, okay? I'm going to make it big. Okay. What is important? What are your students' priorities? What are the students' most important lagging skills that are easiest to reach? Meaning, most of our students in special education have a lot of lagging skills. They have a lot of deficits. They have a lot of areas and room for improvement. But what are the ones that are going to be easiest to reach? Okay, maybe you go back and look at that flop level assessments and you look at what the student already has a bit of a skill set of, and can you build on that? Okay. Where is that student going to be most successful? Is it going to be in a content area where they didn't even place in level 1 because they're so behind, or their skill level is so below even the placement? Or maybe you start with an area where your student already has 1 or 2 levels and needs to just up to that 3rd level. Example of the functional reading that we did. The student could identify their name at a secondary level. They mastered a lot of the sight words in lists 1 through 3, and they scored 35% in lists 4 through 6. So maybe that would be a great program to work on with them. Okay. What are the students' needs that can help them increase meaningful participation within the classroom and the community? Well, let's look at those sight word lists. The lists from 4 through 6. A lot of them have to do with community, shopping, words around the neighborhood. Is that a goal or a priority for you? Is that a goal and a priority for your family, for the student's family, to have meaningful participation? Are there ways that any of those sight words can be integrated around the school where your student can be interacting? Can they be going and finding items off a shopping list in a grocery store? Okay, I want you to think about, what can this goal help you achieve that's meaningful for the student? Okay. Do you have a community-based training goal, or a pre-vocational goal, or an independent skills goal? I highly recommend you have a combination. Let's continue. What is important to the family? What would they like to see their child learning? Somebody shared that those communication and social skills indexes are usually the highest level of priority for families. They want their children to be able to communicate in an appropriate way. Can any of those functional sight words be used with goals from the SLP? Can they be used in building out sentences and language for verbal students? Can they be used in an augmentative communication device for nonverbal students? Can they be used in conjunction with finding things in technology when they're browsing the web? Can we be combining things like what is important and meaningful for the family and what are they doing at home with what we teach at school? Okay. Have you asked the student what they would like to learn? Can you sit down with your student after you've assessed and go, what did you like the best? Did you like money? Should we learn more about bills? Hey, let's do some work with coins. Would you like to practice shopping? Hey, what about time telling? Do you have a watch? Can you tell what time it is on your watch? Would you like to learn what time it is so you can show up at different places? Okay, don't fear about having that conversation with the students. It's going to make that buy-in for these programs so much more valuable to them as well. Think about your own daily schedule that you run as a teacher in the classrooms. What programs can be worked on during different blocks? You already have a math block. You probably already have a language arts block. Maybe you have a voc block, vocational block. Can some of these programs be worked on during that time with your students in sections that you are already doing? Okay. What about tasks that you can work on throughout the day, like tying your shoes, like washing your hands, like getting your coat and backpack on and lining up to go out the door to go home? Okay. These programs can be selected and worked on in a meaningful way. Do you have a variety of direct instruction and task analysis programs? We didn't talk about the types of programs that are in the lessons today because we're only talking about how we place them in the program, but you will notice that many of the programs in the functional academics are created for a direct instruction environment, which means you are sitting down and working individually, presenting an instruction to the student and waiting for one correct response. Many of the other programs that are found in independent skills, pre-vocational, community-based training, etc., are what we call task analysis programs. They are programs that are a sequence of steps that a student has to master in order to be able to do a skill independently, like tying their shoes, or making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, or crossing the street. So do you have a variety? Can you play it up a little bit? It's not always fun to be sitting at a desk in front of a student all day long, and we don't have time for that as well. When we jump into the curriculum deep dive program, we'll learn a little bit about how we can vary direct instruction with independent activities and generalization and application lessons. Okay, so of the programs that you chose to work on for your students, is there a mix of the direct instruction and task analysis? What programs do you already have materials for that could be easily integrated into your material library for functional academics? We know that it takes a lot to build out a material library, and it takes time. But what do you already have in your classroom? Maybe you've already started to work on letter sound ID. Maybe you're a first grade teacher or kindergarten teacher that's already teaching decoding and reading. Can you use some of those really fun materials that you have to run some of these measured database programs with students who need it? Okay, so these are the things I want you to ask yourself when you decide which programs to select to work on with each one of your students. You will not have the same program sequence for every one of your students. Everyone will place a little bit differently in that assessment. Everyone's going to start a little bit differently in the program. I do want to review quickly because I don't think I mentioned it. When you have your completed plot chart, let's see this, you can see here that this student can pass level 1 to identify their name. This is secondary. Can pass level 2, reading most of the sight words off lesson 3. And they're on level 3 right now. We want to begin the program with the student where they need to be, which means one step beyond, one level just above where they are at. What happens if we decided to go from reading sight words 84% on level 2 to jumping right to answering all WH questions in a reading text? That student would become very frustrated in a very short amount of time. Or what happens if we start the program with all of the sight words that the student already knows? That can be pretty boring, don't you think? So in order to eliminate and reduce frustration and boredom, the recommendation is to start the program at the level just beyond where they placed in the assessment. Okay, I'm going to go back. So now that you have selected the programs you want to work on with your students, for each one of your students, maybe you just want to start with one program, maybe 3, maybe 6. Okay, organize yourselves. To sit down and do a direct instruction lesson with a student could take around 10 minutes. Okay, how much time in your day can you accommodate to work on these programs within your schedule? I have other tools that I can share with you about scheduling and classroom management. I can show it to you on the Functional Academics website a bit later. but now it's time to get organized. Okay, you've chosen the programs you want to work. You've carefully thought about which programs and how you're going to run them and why. Now you're going to go and pull those lesson plans that we talked about. If you have a print program, you're going to pull those lesson plans from the program masters. If you have digital download, which I showed you on functional academics, you're going to go to those content areas and print those lesson plans and data sheets, and you're going to start organizing your program data book. If you're a cloud user, this is where you begin your program configuration piece. Module number 3 talks about how to set up these programs in United TI. Basically, what you're doing is telling the system what you want that data sheet to look like, so that when you sit down to work with your student, you have it readily available to be able to code correct and incorrect responses. For both programs, now it's time to organize your instructional schedule. Again, I'll show you where a really helpful video is that can be useful for you. And it's time to organize your materials. Now, I don't recommend you go out and organize all the teaching materials in one go. Start with 1 or 2 lessons that you have selected with your students and start preparing those materials. Okay, if it is the sight words and it's the one set of bundle words that you're going to work on for that grocery shopping list, go ahead and prepare those shopping list words. Okay, for those of you that have teaching bundles where the flashcards come with the program, you're all set. Remember that we'll talk about this in the curriculum as well. Remember that the materials are a starting point, and then you can use a variety of different things. Okay, so you're going to go ahead and create your program student data binders, and now you're ready to get going. So I want you to think and discuss, if you're watching this in a group or watching this on your own, think about your own successes and challenges with the assessment. Feel free to reach out and write to us about some of your challenges you may be having. We are more than happy to help you. Think about some of the successes you've had with your assessments. Did you learn something new that you didn't know about a student before? Okay, did you learn that they knew something that you had no idea that they were capable of doing? Okay. How about your student portfolio? Let's get going on that. I would recommend picking 2 or 3 areas. Ideally, those intake forms that are in the assessment testing kits, which are on communication, social skills, and independent skills. Go ahead and see if you can fill those out yourselves and send them home to family. Let them know what you are about to do with your student and what you would like from them. If you've already started running programs, think about it for a moment. What programs have you chosen and why? Are you going to make a change to any of the programs that you've selected based on what you learned here today? Would you like to add more programs based on what you learned here today? Maybe you'll want to go back and complete different sections of the assessment that you didn't think were relevant before, but now you're interested in applying them with your students. And what's something new you learned here today? We'd love to hear from you. So you will find this information. The curriculum overview, I am doing another workshop next Tuesday, December 13th. That curriculum overview webinar will be recorded and also uploaded to this YouTube channel. So I do invite you to look for that as well. Okay. And thank you so much. You have our email. Again, my name is Celeste Marion. I'm the Director of Professional Development and Training for SDES, Specially Designed Education Services, publisher of the Functional Academics Program by Styer-Fitzgerald. You have my email address here, celeste@sdesworks.com. You are welcome to reach out with any questions, comments, suggestions, ideas. We'd also love to hear from you about your successes. Share with us. So thank you again for being here with us today. And you will find many of the links I mentioned in the webinar in the comment section of this video.